President-elect Trump is slamming President Biden's decision to commute the death sentences of nearly every inmate on federal death row.
There are places in this world built not just to contain the body, but to erase the soul. They exist at the very edge of our understanding of justice and punishment, a chilling testament to society's desire for ultimate control over those it deems utterly irredeemable. This is the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility, ADX Florence. To the world, it's known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies, nestled in the remote high desert of Colorado. It is, by every measure, America's toughest prison, a concrete tomb designed for the men our society has deemed the most dangerous, the most volatile, the most capable of inflicting harm, even from behind bars. But what happens when this place, this symbol of ultimate containment, becomes the final destination for men who are once condemned to die, men who are pulled back from the brink of execution by presidential decree, only to be thrust into a new, profound abyss of isolation inside ADX Supermax? Is this true justice, or is it a fate meticulously engineered to be worse than death? Today, we delve into the harrowing intersection of executive clemency and extreme confinement. We investigate the unprecedented story of former federal death row inmates, their sentences commuted by President Biden, who now face a drastically altered future within the unforgiving walls of ADX Supermax. This isn't just a story about justice, it's a political battleground with two presidents and two starkly different visions for the ultimate punishment. To truly grasp the gravity of this situation, you must first comprehend the nature of ADX Florence itself. This isn't just another federal prison. It is a monument to a particular philosophy of incarceration, born out of crisis and fear. In the early 1980s, the federal prison system faced unprecedented levels of violence. At the United States Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois, then the highest security prison, two correctional officers were brutally murdered by inmates on the same day in 1983. This horrific event signaled a critical breaking point, making it clear that traditional maximum security facilities were simply not enough to contain certain individuals. The response was the Administrative Maximum Facility, ADX, in Florence, Colorado. Opened in 1994, its very name speaks volumes. Administrative Maximum, designed for inmates so dangerous, so disruptive, so influential that they could not be safely managed in any other institution. ADX was engineered with one singular, uncompromising purpose: total, absolute control through total, absolute isolation. It was and remains the ultimate solution for the ultimate threat. Within ADX, life is brutally pared down, reduced to the confines of a 7 by 12-foot box constructed almost entirely from poured concrete and reinforced steel. Every single element is either immovable or securely fastened. The bed, the desk, the stool, they are not furniture, but rather extensions of the concrete structure itself. The sink and toilet are combined into a single tamper-proof stainless steel unit designed for function, not comfort. A single light fixture provides illumination, and the only connection to the outside world is a narrow 4-inch wide slit of a window, ingeniously angled so the inmate can see nothing but a sliver of the sky. No ground, no other buildings, crucially, no other human being. This deliberate design is meant to disorient, to systematically sever any meaningful sensory or social connection to the outside world, to remove any point of reference. For a staggering 23 hours a day, this austere box is an inmate's entire universe, their perception of reality sculpted by its unyielding boundaries. That one remaining hour, if earned, is spent in what's known as a recreation cage. Picture a concrete dog run, perhaps larger than their cell but equally barren, enclosed by high walls and a heavy grated ceiling. Again, alone. There is no team sport, no communal exercise, no shared activity. The architecture of ADX isn't merely about preventing escape. It is, in a very real sense, a psychological weapon meticulously designed to dismantle an individual's sense of self, their social connections, and ultimately, their sanity. But this raises a critical question, one that human rights organizations and legal experts have grappled with for decades. What does this level of engineered extreme solitude actually do to the human mind? The answer, as we will explore, is far more disturbing than many realize, and it forms the bedrock of the intense legal and political battle we are now witnessing. The path to ADX is typically reserved for those who have proven too dangerous for even maximum security prisons. But recently, a new and profoundly controversial cohort of inmates has arrived. To understand this unprecedented shift, we must first look to another federal institution, the Federal Death Row Unit in Terre Haute, Indiana. For years, this facility was the final, somber stop for men and women condemned to death by the U.S. government. But in a move that reshaped the landscape of federal capital punishment, President Joe Biden, in the waning days of his first term, exercised one of the most solemn powers of the presidency: clemency. He granted commutations to nearly every remaining inmate on federal death row, a total of 37 individuals, reducing their sentences from death to life imprisonment without parole. It's vital to distinguish commutation from other forms of clemency. A commutation is not a pardon. A pardon acts as a legal forgiveness, often erasing the conviction itself. A commutation, however, only lessens the punishment. The original conviction, the guilt, remains unequivocally in place. For these 37 men, their fate transitioned from imminent execution to an unending life behind bars. For many advocates against capital punishment, this was hailed as an act of profound mercy, a step towards a more humane justice system, consistent with President Biden's long-standing personal opposition to the death penalty and his administration's moratorium on federal executions. However, this decision ignited a fierce political firestorm, drawing immediate and scathing condemnation from President Donald Trump. As reported by ABC News, Trump vehemently slammed Biden's decision, calling it a move by radical left lunatics and asserting that these inmates should go to hell. This was not merely political rhetoric. It laid bare a deeply entrenched ideological divide on the very concept of ultimate punishment. The implications of this political chasm are immense. President Donald Trump explicitly vowed to vigorously pursue the death penalty once he potentially takes office again. He made it clear that reversing Biden's clemency, though legally impossible to undo individual commutations, would be a priority through renewed executions and a more aggressive stance on capital punishment. The ABC News report underscores that Trump's anger was palpable, even evident in social media posts on Christmas Day, where he continued to blast Biden's move. This means the future of federal death row and even the psychological welfare of these commuted inmates is now inextricably tied to the fluctuating political currents of Washington, D.C. What one administration views as a moral imperative, the other views as a dangerous abdication of justice. This is a deeply polarized issue, and I want to hear your thoughts. Given the stark difference in opinion between President Biden and President Donald Trump, do you believe the death penalty serves as a necessary deterrent, or is it a cruel and outdated form of punishment? Your perspectives help shape this crucial debate, so share them thoughtfully in the comments below. The political rhetoric, however, quickly morphed into tangible action, impacting the lives of these commuted inmates. Shortly after President Biden's declaration of clemency, a directive was issued that saw 8 of these former death row inmates transferred not to a less restrictive facility, but to the most severe prison in the entire federal system, ADX Supermax. This move immediately ignited a fresh and intense federal lawsuit. The inmates, represented by their legal teams, argued that this categorical transfer is not only arbitrary, but fundamentally unconstitutional. Their core claim is that they are being subjected to a second punishment, effectively punished for having received clemency. The lawsuit contends that these transfers occurred without the individualized assessments and justifications typically mandated for ADX placement. Indeed, some reports suggest that even corrections officials had previously agreed that certain individuals among this group did not meet the stringent criteria usually required for such a high-security designation. But what makes this specific transfer so legally and ethically explosive? The argument hinges on a powerful claim that these men, having been spared execution, are now being subjected to conditions so harsh, so psychologically damaging, that they violate the United States Constitution's Eighth Amendment ban on cruel and unusual punishment. This is where the true fight for their humanity begins. The profound and devastating impact of prolonged solitary confinement has been extensively documented. Psychologists and human rights advocates refer to the resulting psychological breakdown as Supermax syndrome. This is not a casual term. It describes a severe cluster of symptoms: profound confusion, intense paranoia, vivid hallucinations, chronic anxiety, panic attacks, and uncontrollable outbursts of rage. In some of the most tragic cases, it leads to self-harm and even suicide. A landmark 2014 report by Amnesty International unequivocally described solitary confinement as a practice that, when prolonged, can unequivocally amount to torture. The lawsuit filed on behalf of these commuted inmates draws heavily on this body of evidence. It posits that placing these men in ADX is not primarily about mitigating an immediate security threat, which is the prison's stated purpose, but rather about delivering a retaliatory form of retribution. John Taylor, one of the prominent plaintiffs in this high-stakes lawsuit, articulated a profound fear that resonates with countless others in solitary confinement: the terror of losing all connection with the outside world, of being metaphorically buried alive. These men were moved from a facility where they had at least some degree of human interaction and limited access to rehabilitative programs to an environment designed to systematically strip away virtually all of it. This isn't just a change of address, it's a redefinition of their existence. The government's defense, though not yet fully articulated in public, will undoubtedly hinge on the necessity of security, arguing that individuals convicted of such heinous crimes, despite their commutations, require the highest level of confinement. The lawsuit, however, forcefully counters that this is a punitive blanket policy, not a nuanced assessment of individual risk. This begs a fundamental question. Should the nature of the original crime forever dictate the conditions of a life sentence, even if an inmate no longer poses an immediate disciplinary threat? And if so, what does that say about our capacity for rehabilitation? Your thoughtful insights on this ethical dilemma are invaluable. Please share your perspective. The legal battle over the ADX transfers is far from over. It is a high-stakes confrontation that challenges the very boundaries of the federal prison system's authority and, indeed, the executive branch's power. It asks, does a presidential commutation, which spares a life, somehow grant the government a carte blanche to impose any level of suffering short of death? Or are there fundamental, inalienable human rights that persist, even for those convicted of the most egregious crimes against society? This particular case, focused on these former death row prisoners, has the potential to establish a profound precedent, not just for the 37 commuted inmates, but for thousands of other individuals enduring long-term solitary confinement across the nation. It forces us, as a society, to confront an uncomfortable truth. The system of punishment in America extends far beyond the initial verdict of guilt or innocence, or even the binary choice between life and death. It delves into the precise and often brutal conditions of existence itself, even after a sentence has seemingly been reduced. And this is where the the political dynamic from the ABC News report becomes even more critical. President Biden's administration views the death penalty as fundamentally inconsistent with modern justice standards, particularly for a devout Catholic who has long expressed moral objections to capital punishment. His actions were a deliberate move away from the federal executions that had resumed under the previous administration. Conversely, President Donald Trump's vow to vigorously pursue the death penalty is a clear signal of his intent to restore and perhaps even expand federal capital punishment. This creates a volatile situation. If a future administration were to reverse the current moratorium, the legal landscape surrounding these commuted inmates could become even more fraught, while their individual commutations cannot be undone. As the ABC News report confirms, the broader push for executions and a more punitive penal system could certainly influence how future cases are handled and potentially how the courts view the conditions of their imprisonment. The political winds are changing, and with them, the very philosophy guiding our federal justice system. This isn't just abstract policy. It directly impacts the lives and the very existence of men confined in America's toughest prison. The death row debate is far from over. It has merely evolved, taking on new and complex dimensions within the walls of ADX Supermax. The story of the commuted inmates sent to ADX Supermax is a narrative without a clean or simple ending. It is a stark, haunting reminder that a sentence, particularly one involving such extreme confinement, is not merely a fixed length of time, but an all-consuming quality of existence. For these men, the stroke of a presidential pen offered a reprieve from execution, yet delivered them to a place meticulously engineered to crush the human spirit, to erase all but the most basic functions of life. They were, in a very real sense, saved from one form of execution only to confront another, a profound social and psychological death meticulously orchestrated and buried deep within the desolate, unforgiving Colorado Rockies. Their ongoing struggle, now further complicated by the sharp political divide between the current and former administrations, compels us all to confront fundamental questions about justice, mercy, and the boundaries of punishment long after the gavel has fallen. The line separating legitimate security from excessive cruelty is a razor's edge, constantly debated and legally challenged. This pivotal case, unfolding at the intersection of executive power, constitutional rights, and the highest levels of political contention, is balanced precisely upon that edge. What happens in the courts, and indeed what happens in future elections, will not only dictate the fate of these specific men, but will also profoundly help define the moral and legal character of the justice system that holds them. The legacy of death row is being rewritten, not just in Clemency, but in the desolate halls of Supermax, under the shadow of shifting political wills. The cases that lead individuals to federal death row are often among the most complex, tragic, and harrowing in American criminal justice. Understanding the crimes, the trials, and the arguments for and against their original sentences is crucial. We are planning a deep dive into one of these specific, significant cases in an upcoming video. We want to know, of the many individuals who have faced or still face federal execution, whose story do you believe is the most critical for us to investigate and understand next? Suggest a case or a specific inmate in the comments below, and your input could guide our next in-depth investigation. Thank you for joining us on this difficult but essential exploration. If you find value in these discussions and believe these stories deserve to be told, please consider subscribing to our channel and sharing this video. Your support is vital in helping us continue to bring these critical questions to light. Stay safe and stay informed.